I work as an emergency doctor at the City Central Hospital and married a female criminal police officer from the provincial department. We had a flash marriage and got our marriage certificate within 7 days. On the first night of our marriage, she ran off saying there was a suspect to catch. I also ran off saying there were car accident victims to attend to. I was even bragging to my buddies, calling it a powerhouse alliance. Then the next week she showed up with 3 police cars blocking the entrance of the emergency room with a single command. 6 plainclothes officers rushed in with her leading the way, walking straight up to me and glancing at the female patient whose wound I was stitching. The expression was colder than handcuffs. Don't let either of these two get away. The hand holding the needle and thread froze. The nurse beside me whispered, "Darjo, is that your wife?" I said nothing. I was thinking about how long the divorce cooling-off period lasts. Rue's gaze first swept over the needle holder in my hand, then over the woman lying on the operating table and finally landed on my face. I recognized that look last week. I happened to see her on a video call with a colleague at home, and she used that exact same look when interrogating an armed robbery suspect. She took a step forward, her leather shoes pressing against the floor, soaked in disinfectant. The sound crisp and cold. "Zhou Yan." She called me by my full name, not Daro, not husband. Of course, she had never called me that, but Zhao Yan. I've worked in the emergency department for 3 years with a drawer full of 20 blood donation certificates, and I've seen patients who fell from the 7th floor and still asked, "Has my gym membership expired?" But at this moment, I feel like the one about to be in trouble is me. Don't let either of these two get away. The surgical light was blindingly white. The ECG monitor beeped steadily in the corner, each beep like a second ticking by. 6 plain-clothed officers spread out. 2 blocked the corridor, 2 sealed the back door, and the remaining 2 stood on either side of the operating table. They were dressed in everyday civilian clothes, but a small bulge at their waists gave away where they holstered their guns. I looked down at the wound. I was halfway through stitching. The female patient had a laceration about 15 centimeters long on her abdomen, reaching down to the facial layer. The deep sutures were already done with just 7 stitches left on the surface. The thread end was exposed with a slight ooze of blood at the wound's edge like a mouth that had been silenced mid-sentence. "I'll finish these stitches first," I said. Shun Rue didn't nod, nor did he shake his head. I took that as tacit consent. Nurse Shirao-chan stood beside the instrument table, her hands gripping the sterile gauze, knuckles white. She lowered her voice. "Dara, is that really your wife?" "Yeah." Why did she bring so many people?" "Probably because I didn't wash the dishes yesterday." Shirao-chan didn't laugh. I didn't laugh either. I picked up the needle holder again, my eyes never leaving the surgical area. Insert the needle, pass through the dermis, withdraw the needle, tie the knot. My hands were steady. In the 6 years with the Iron Blade Special Operations Unit, I had sutured wounds on helicopters in tunnels and in ice caves at -28 degrees C. The vibration of eta rotation, rotor blades, the shock waves from artillery shells, the muffled groans of wounded soldiers biting down on leather straps. My hands never trembled in those environments. There was no way I'd be intimidated by a few plain officers. But Shan Ruer didn't know about those things. In her understanding, her husband was just an ordinary attending physician in the emergency department of the city center hospital with a monthly salary of 15,000 yuan who didn't smoke or drink and occasionally played basketball. During the blind date, her mother asked me, "Shia, what do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm an emergency doctor." Her mother thought it was good. Stable income, decent social status, suitable for her daughter, who was a criminal police officer, always out on the streets. I wasn't lying. I just didn't say the other things out loud. The 6th stitch tightened. Shin Ruer kept looking at me. Her gaze was not on the doctor's suturing technique, but on the distance and angle between me and the female patient, as well as my expression while stitching. She was observing. This is a detective's instinct, just like how I instinctively reach for a stethoscope when I hear an abnormal heartbeat. The difference is that her current target of observation is me. "Last stitch," I said. Shinru didn't respond, and I tightened the thread, tied the final square knot, and placed the needle holder back onto the tray with a click. The wound is sutured. I recommend avoiding strenuous activity for 24 hours. Watch for any redness, swelling, or discharge. Are you done? Shuinru interrupted me. I'm done. She tilted her chin toward the plain-clothed officers behind her. 2 men immediately stepped forward, one on each side of the hospital bed. One of them pulled handcuffs from his waist. I stared at the handcuffs, their metal glinting, identical to the pair lying on the coffee table at home. On the 3rd day of our marriage, I found 3 pairs of handcuffs and a bottle of pepper spray in the bedroom drawer. I initially thought it was a sex toy. Later, I realized it was the real thing. Zhao Yan Xinrui walked up to me less than half a meter away. She had a faint smell of gunpowder mixed with mint, gun oil, and chewing gum. I need to ask you a few questions about this patient. Okay. Do you know her? I glanced at the woman on the operating table. Her eyes were closed and the cardiac monitor showed stable vital signs. Her face was pale with a scratch on her cheekbone, and there was dried blood under the nails of both hands. Not her own. The color was darker, someone else's. On the inside of her left wrist, there was a coin-sized tattoo, a dagger piercing through an eye. I recognized this tattoo. 3 years ago, the jungles of northern Myanmar. The mission was C-named Candle Shadow, a joint operation. Iron Blade was in charge of the assault, while the Military Intelligence Bureau handled intelligence support. Back then, this woman was C-named Nightingale. During the operation, she was hit in the right shoulder by a stray bullet. It was I who stopped the bleeding and stitched her wound in waist-deep, muddy water. She lay on my back as we retreated, repeating one phrase over and over. Don't stop. If you stop, I'll die. I didn't stop. She didn't die. But these are things I cannot speak of. I shouldn't be thinking about this right now. I don't know her. I said she was brought to the emergency room by a taxi driver an hour ago. The registration information says she had an external injury and no family members accompanied her. Xin Rue looked into my eyes. There's a technique in criminal interrogation. Stare at the other person's pupils. When someone lies, their pupils contract slightly. But she didn't know that in the anti-interrogation training I received at Tyren. Pupil control was the very first lesson in the basics. She stared at me for 3 seconds. I didn't move at all. Take her away. Xin Rue turned to the plain-clothes officer and said, Wait a moment. I blocked the front of the operating bed. She just had stitches done and needs at least 4 hours of observation before being moved. Her physical condition won't allow it. Xin Rue turned around. Zhao Yan, this is official business. Xin Rue, this is my patient. We locked eyes. The surgical light shone on her face. Her features sharp, high cheekbones, a defined jawline. In the 2 weeks since our marriage, the total time we'd spent together at home was less than 10 hours. My deepest impression of her was the sound of her key sliding into the lock when she came home at 3 in the morning and the bottle of mineral water missing from the fridge when she left at 6. For hours, I held up 4 fingers. After 4 hours, you can take her wherever you want. But in front of me, she is a patient. The patient's safety comes first. Shinru's brow twitched, slight subtle, but my eyesight was sharp. She was evaluating me, not evaluating her husband, but evaluating someone standing in her way. 2 hours, she said. 3.5. 3 hours. Final offer. Xin Rue tilted his head slightly. As your wife, this is the greatest sincerity I can offer. Deal. She turned and went out to make a phone call. 2 plain-clothes officers stayed at the door of the ward while the rest withdrew to the corridor. Shirao Chan let out a long sigh behind me, his whole body slumping against the wall like a deflated fur bag. Dara, your wife is really terrifying. I took off my gloves and tossed them into the medical waste bin. Not terrifying, but the kind of pressure I used to face before is not the same type as the one she gives. On the operating table, the woman's fingers twitched slightly. I looked down. Her eyelids didn't open. Her lips barely moved. But her right hand, 3 fingers gently tapped 3 times beneath the sheet. 3 short knocks, evenly spaced, precise rhythm. This is not an unconscious muscle twitch. This is a contact signal I used during the Iron Blade era. 3 short beeps. Received awaiting instructions. A chill ran down my spine. She knows who I am. She was here for me. I returned to the office, closed the door, and took off my white coat, hanging it over the back of the chair. On the desk lay the medical records I hadn't finished writing this morning, with a cup of instant coffee gone cold beside them. Outside the window, the blue and red lights of the police car were still spinning, their beams slicing through the blinds and strips across the wall. I sat in the chair for 30 seconds. Then I pulled open the bottom drawer. Beneath the medical records, a flat plastic box was pressed. Inside the box was a phone, not a commercially available model, entirely matte black with no brand logo and twice the thickness of a normal phone. A military-grade encrypted communication terminal. When I was discharged from the military, Xiao Guodong said, "Take this thing with you just in case you ever need it." I said, "That day will never come." He said, "Take it." I turned it on, entered a 16-digit password and waited 5 seconds. The screen lit up. A line of text appeared in the top left corner. "Channel secure." I dialed a number. It rang twice and the person on the other end picked up. No words were spoken, only the faint hum of electrical noise. The rule of the iron blade. First, wait for the other party to provide an identity confirmation code. The wind is strong today. Be careful when you go out. I said the first half. There was a second of silence on the other end. Then a low voice. "Finish the second half. Bring your knife." Identity confirmed. "Sewer." The voice shifted in tone from weariness to surprise. "Is that you, old Zhao?" "Zhao Yan." There was a 2C silence on the other end of the line. "Xiao Guodong, former commander of the Iron Blade Special Operations Group. Now a major general in a certain unit of the Central Theater Command. My direct superior and the man who had trained me from scratch since I was an 18-year-old green recruit. You're calling me on this line, so something's wrong." His voice was very low. Behind him, there was the faint sound of people moving as if he had stepped out of a meeting midway. "Code named Nightingale from the Military Intelligence Bureau. Do you have any recent information on her?" The other end fell silent again. This time it was longer. "Where did you see her?" Xiao Guodong asked. "I was stitching up her stomach." Xiao Guodong's breath caught for a moment. 2 weeks now. The Military Intelligence Bureau has been looking for her. Operation Lighthouse. Have you heard of it? No. I've been out of the military for 3 years. I haven't heard of any operations. You shouldn't have heard of it either. Xiao Guodong paused. Nightingale spent 2 years deep undercover in a cross-border drug trafficking network half a month ago. Her identity was suspected to have been exposed and she went off the grid. The Military Intelligence Bureau activated emergency protocols but couldn't find her. I swiveled in my chair and looked out the window at the police cars. Xin Rui was standing beside one of them talking on the phone, his profile illuminated intermittently by blue light. "My wife led a team to arrest her." I said. "What?" "It's the Provincial Criminal Investigation Team. They might have mistaken Nightingale for a suspect in a drug trafficking organization." Xiao Guodong was silent for 5 seconds. "Zhao Yan." "Yeah." "Your wife is a criminal police officer." "Yeah." "How did you find a partner?" "Don't worry about that." I rubbed my brow. The problem is Nightingale can't be handed over now if the information she knows leaks into the public security system and if there's an inside line in the network. She can't go through official channels. Xiao Guodong finished for me. "So, she came to you." She tapped 3 short signals under the blanket. Xiao Guodong took a deep breath. 3 short received awaiting instructions. This means she not only recognized me, but also saw me as someone she could connect with. "I need 12 to 18 hours. Xiao Guodong said. "I'll coordinate with the Military Intelligence Bureau to get a team over for backup before that. Before that, I need to make sure my wife doesn't take her out of the hospital. Can you do that?" I glanced out the window. Xin Rui had hung up the phone and was walking toward the lobby. His steps were quick, the hem of his trench coat brushing against his knees. "Hard to say. I've only been married to her for 2 weeks. You served 6 years in Special Ops. Special Ops didn't teach me how to handle a wife." Xiao Guodong let out a rare laugh. "Keep her occupied. No revealing your identity. No using the iron blade system. You're a civilian, so act like one." "Roger that." I hung up the phone, stuffed the device back into the bottom layer of the plastic box, and pressed a medical record folder on top of it. 3 knocks sounded at the door. Shin Rue pushed the door open and walked in before I could answer. Her gaze swept across the office. The desk, drawers, window sill, trash can. The movement was quick, but each point lingered for a fraction of a second. Occupational habit. Have a seat. I pointed to the chair across from me. She didn't sit down. How did that woman get here? By taxi. Taxi license plate. I'm the attending physician, not a parking lot security guard. You can check the surveillance footage. She looked at me. Her gaze was as white as an operating light. How were her injuries caused? Sharp force injuries. The wound edges are neat, suggesting a single-edged blade about 2 centimeters wide. Not self-inflicted. The angle is wrong. Self-inflicted wounds are usually on the inner forearm or neck, not the abdomen. Shin Rue's eyebrow twitched slightly, lifting a little. Your assessment is very specific. The emergency department sees dozens of trauma cases every day. Experience comes with volume. Isn't it the same for you in criminal investigation? With enough exposure, you can tell at a glance whether it's a primary scene trace. She didn't refute, but the look in her eyes had changed. I couldn't quite say what it had turned into, but it was different from before. Like she had been interrogating a suspect only to suddenly realize the person sitting across from her was more complicated than she had thought. After 3 hours or up, I'm taking her with me, Shan Rue said, if her physical condition allows it. Zhao Yanh, do you always care this much about your patients? Her tone softened by half a note. It's not that they've loosened up. They've just switched to a different kind of knife. I recognize this rhetoric. A dull knife. First, they let your guard down, and by the time it cuts in, you don't even feel the pain. Once an emergency patient is in my hands, they're my responsibility until they're discharged. No matter who she is. Shin Rue looked at me for 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked away. When the door closed, the wind stirred the medical records on the desk. I caught the scent of mint and gun oil in the air current she left behind. The office fell silent again with only the sound of plainclothes officers pacing in the hallway. I picked up the cup of cold coffee and took a sip. Bitter. Shin Rue left 2 plainclothes officers at the door of the ward and took the rest of the team to the hospital surveillance room to review the footage. I waited for 10 minutes. After confirming the corridor was clear, I picked up a temperature chart, a routine checkup move, and pushed open the door to enter the ward. Nightingale lay in bed. The curtains were drawn and the light from the small bedside lamp was very dim. The green waveforms on the monitor jumped one after another. Her eyes were open. It wasn't the dazed state of just waking up. It was a clarity that cut to the bone. Her 2 eyes reflected a faint glimmer in the darkness like a cat staring at its prey. We locked eyes for a second. 3 years no see, Stitcher. She spoke, her voice low, her throat sounding like sandpaper scraping. You came running into my ear, hoping I'd stitch you back from death's door a second time. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. The movement pulled at the wound on her abdomen, and she frowned but didn't make a sound. An hour ago, 3 people chased me to the east side of town. I shook them off. The taxi was hijacked halfway and the driver passed out from fright. Fong Sudong's men. A flicker passed through her eyes. You're quite well informed. Just a guess. Among the cross-border drug trafficking networks, the only one who could deploy so many people in the city is Fong Sudong. She didn't deny it. 2 years undercover, she said, her voice even lower, as if speaking to the ceiling. I made it into his inner circle. I've got the complete upstream and downstream financial chain, the transport routes, and she paused. And what his people within the public security system. My fingers paused. On the temperature chart, just one. One is enough at the provincial department level. Car passed by outside, its headlights sweeping through the gap in the curtains before disappearing. So, you went off the grid for 2 weeks. Not because you were exposed, but because you found out there's a mole in the police and didn't dare to go through official channels. I couldn't even use the military intelligence contact points. Fong Sudong's people are monitoring every abnormal signal. I had to find someone they would never be able to trace. She looked at me, a retired emergency room doctor, 3 years out of service with sealed files. How did you find me? 3 years ago when you stitched up my shoulder. Your name tag was crooked. I remembered your name. She paused. Zhao Yan. Iron Blade Special Operations Unit. Field Medical Officer. Code name Stitcher. Later you retired. Your files were sealed. But your medical license registration was public on the Health Commission's database. So, you used an elimination method in a public database to find a retired special ops soldier. Took me 3 days. I flipped a page of the temperature chart and wrote down a normal body temperature. Where is the information you have? In my head. No physical backup. I planned it that way from day one. Fong Sudong searched me 7 times. Smart. But the problem is that woman outside. Your wife. She corrected me. That female detective outside is going to take you away in 3 hours if there's one of Fong Sudong's people in the provincial department once you enter the public security system. I won't make it to the next day before Fong Sudong finds out. And then you and everything in your head disappear. She said nothing. Silence for a few seconds. The monitor beeped steadily. My people will arrive in 12 to 18 hours. I said until then you have to stay in the hospital. How am I supposed to stay? Your wife doesn't seem like the easy to negotiate type. When she said, your wife, a faint, subtle curve appeared at the corner of her mouth. Don't worry about that. I clipped the temperature chart back onto the footboard of the bed. Your only task now is to lie down and act like an ordinary patient who needs to be observed after surgery. I've played the mistress of a drug dealer for 2 years. Playing a patient isn't hard. I turned and walked toward the door. Ditcher. Chim. Thank you. Her voice suddenly softened. For that time 3 years ago. And for this time. I didn't turn around. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you're safely out of here. I pulled the door open and walked out. In the hallway. 2 plain-clothes officers were leaning against the wall, one of them scrolling through his phone. When he saw me come out, he put his phone away and pretended to be seriously inspecting my badge. Dara, how is she? Vital signs are stable, but there's a risk of infection. If she develops a fever in the next few days, you can explain to Captain Shin why moving her early caused the wound to get infected. The plain-clothes officer's expression shifted slightly. So, we still can't take him away. Medically, it's called the golden period for postoperative observation. Got it. They didn't understand. But they didn't dare say they didn't. I turned and walked to the nurse's station, typing a new set of orders on the computer. Postoperative abdominal laceration repair. Administer antibiotics to prevent infection. Monitor temperature and wound. Condition every 6 hours. Recommend observation for no less than 24 hours. 24 hours. That was the maximum I could reasonably negotiate. Shirao Chan leaned over from across the nurse's station and whispered, Dear Zhao, what do we do? Your wife doesn't look like someone who can wait 24 hours. That's her business. I'm just writing the orders. But I'm so scared. Scared of what? Scared she'll handcuff you, too. I picked up the next medical record. Don't worry. I'm pretty good at being handcuffed. Shirao Chen's eyes widened. What did you say? Nothing. Bring the dressing cart over. Bed 3 needs a dressing change. 2 p.m. The flow of people in the emergency hall returned to normal. Only one of the 3 police cars remained at the entrance. But Shan Rui's people hadn't withdrawn. 2 plain-clothes officers took turns guarding the ward door like 2 nails driven into the corridor. I continued seeing patients in the emergency room. A delivery driver with a fractured finger, a middle-aged man with a fishbone stuck in his throat, and an elderly man who fell off an electric scooter and chipped half a front tooth. An ordinary afternoon until Shin Rui's partner, Hanjin, walked in. Hanjiang, deputy captain of the 3rd Brigade of the Provincial Criminal Investigation Corps, 35 years old, with a crew cut, broad shoulders, and a habit of standing with his feet wide apart. A common trait among those who have practiced SA. When he entered the emergency room, I was stopping the bleeding for the old man with the missing front tooth. Dr. Zhao. He leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. Yeah. Can I have a word? After finishing up with the elderly man's gum bleeding and giving Shirao Chan a few follow-up instructions, I followed Han Jiang to the emergency exit at the end of the hallway. The lights in the fire escape were motion-activated. They flickered on as we entered. A stark pale white. Han Jiang pulled a cigarette from his pocket, put it between his lips, but didn't light it. I heard you're blocking us from taking the person. Post-operative observation period medical protocol. I said medical protocol. He repeated, smacking his lips. Dara, do you know how big this case is? No, and I don't need to know. Cross-border drug trafficking with a total amount involved of over 800 million. The woman you're blocking from being transferred is very likely a core member of Fang Sudong's drug trafficking syndicate. When he said Fang Sudong, my expression didn't change. Then we'll have to wait until her physical condition allows it. Han Jiang looked at me. The way he looked at people was different from Xin Rue. Xin Rue was a scalpel, precise and calm. Han Jin was a hammer, slamming down to see if you'd shatter or not. Dara, I'm going to be blunt. Go ahead. Shirine marrying you was arranged by her family. You know exactly where the two of you stand. He took the unlit cigarette out of his mouth, twirled it between his fingers, and said she was a soldier under my command. The youngest lead investigator in the provincial department. Cracked the Nanho serial case at 24. Earned a third-class merit at 26. She has never been half-hearted about her work in her life. I said nothing. Blocking her case is blocking her life. Captain Han, I'm not blocking anyone's case. I'm just fulfilling my duty as a doctor. He let out a laugh. It wasn't a friendly laugh. More like a dismissive sneer after looking down and sizing me up. Fine, you're a doctor, and I respect that, but you'd better get one thing straight. This case is none of a Stitch Sewer's business. He patted me on the shoulder with considerable force, then turned and walked up the stairs. After the sound of his footsteps faded, the motion sensor light on the fire escape went out. I stood in the darkness, smelling the tobacco scent he left behind. A wound stitcher. He was right. I am indeed a wound stitcher, but some wounds aren't stitched in the hospital. When I returned to the nurse station, Shirao Chan handed me a bottle of water. Dara, you don't look well. Didn't sleep well last night. Is it because of your wife? Shirao Chan, why are you so interested in my personal life today? She stuck out her tongue and backed off. I sat down in front of the computer, opened the hospital's internal system, and pulled up today's emergency admission records. On the surface, I was checking medical records. Actually, I was doing something else. I was recalling what Xiao Guang said. Operation Lighthouse Nightingale had been undercover for 2 years. Fang Sudong's upstream and downstream chains, the financial routes. Once these pieces fall into place, they would be enough to take down the entire network. But the prerequisite is that the intelligence in her mind must not be leaked in advance. There is a mole in the provincial department. The rank is not low. I have someone in mind. A person who, though not present in the emergency hall today, has their name appearing in the approval column of every report submitted by Xin Ru, Deputy Director of the Provincial Criminal Investigation Corps. Lu Jinaya. So far, this is just intuition. There is no evidence. But 6 years with the Iron Blade taught me one thing. Intuition arrives before evidence. But intuition cannot be used as evidence. I need time. And time is what I lack the most right now. 5 in the afternoon. Shun Ruer returned. This time, she didn't bring any plain-clothes officers. She walked alone into the office of the Deputy Director of the Emergency Department. My office was next door with the door left open, so I could hear her talking to the Deputy Director. Director Chan, I need to access Zhao Yan's personal file. Director Chun was a bald old man in his 50s who had spent his entire career in emergency medicine and had seen it all. But he still seemed a bit nervous facing a provincial-level criminal police officer. Zhao Yan's file. This requires going through HR procedures. Captain Shin. Can be expedited. I need it now. I stopped writing in my hand. All right, let me check first. Director Chen's keyboard clattered for a while. What's wrong? His educational background and work experience are all here. But the part before he turned 22 shows inaccessible in the system. There was a toucan silence. What do you mean by inaccessible? It means I can't click into it. It's grayed out. Let me try accessing it again with higher permissions. The keyboard clattered a few more times. Still no luck. It says the security classification of this file exceeds the current system permissions. I noticed Shin Rue's breathing pattern change slightly. It was subtle, but I caught it. An emergency doctor's file classified. I don't understand either. Why don't you ask HR? Shin Rue said nothing more. The sound of a chair being pushed back. Leather shoes stepping on the floor. She walked out as she passed by my office door. Her footsteps paused for 0.3 seconds. She didn't come in. But that 0.3-second pause made my back tense more than any accusation could. 7 in the evening. I got off work and rode my electric scooter home. The apartment was one I rented before getting married. 60 m. 2 bedrooms. And a living room furnished with the most basic IKEA pieces. After the wedding, Shin Rue moved in, adding a shoe cabinet, a full-length mirror, and a row of skincare products on the bathroom counter. Other than that, there wasn't much evidence of two people living together in this home. When I opened the door, the lights were off. She hadn't come back. I heated up a serving of frozen dumplings in the kitchen and ate 12 of them. I washed the dishes and wiped down the stove. Then, I sat on the living room sofa, took out the encrypted phone, and checked the signal. No new messages. Xiao Guang was still coordinating on his end. I leaned back on the sofa and closed my eyes for a while. My mind never rests. Fang Sudong's drug trafficking network. The results of Nightingale's 2-year undercover operation. The mole within the public security system. And the case my wife is working on. All these threads are tangled together. And me, a veteran who should only be stitching up wounds, was pulled back into the vortex I left 3 years ago by Nightingale's 3 knocks 3 years ago when I wrote my discharge report. There was a line at the end. Applicant's declaration. Voluntarily renounce all active duty authority and identity codes. Henceforth to live as a civilian. I signed it. Xiao Guodong stared at the report for a long time and finally wrote 4 words in the approval column. Approved. Take care. He didn't ask why. He knew why. The last 3 hours of Operation Candle Shadow. A skirmish in the jungle. I carried Nightingale on my back for 6 kilometers. Stitched up 3 people's wounds and stopped the bleeding for 5. But the 6th person, the youngest soldier in the platoon, 19 years old, his femoral artery was severed by shrapnel. I pressed down on that artery for 40 minutes. The helicopter never came. He passed away under my hands. When I left, his blood had already seeped clean through my fingers, leaving only a body gradually cooling beneath my hands. For 3 months after that, I had nightmares every night. When I woke up, I applied for discharge from the military. Working in the emergency room was my way of atoning. If I couldn't stitch that life back together, I'd stitch other lives one by one until my hands stopped shaking. The sound of a key sliding into a lock. I opened my eyes. Shin Rue pushed the door open and came in, having changed into a different set of clothes. A dark gray hoodie with her hair let down. A far cry from the stern female detective I had seen in the emergency room during the day. She paused when she saw me sitting in the darkness. Didn't turn on the light. Forgot. She flicked on the hallway light, changed into slippers, and grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge after drinking half a small bottle. She leaned against the dining table and looked at me. Your files from before the age of 22 have been sealed. She said directly. No preamble. No probing. Why can you find out the reason for the sealing? I can't. I used level 3 clearance and still couldn't access it. HR said it requires declassification authorization from a military unit at the corps level or above. She took a sip of water. Corps level or above. She repeated. What that means? You can figure it out yourself. Were you in the military? A lot of people have been in the military. Being in the military doesn't require sealing your files. I didn't respond. She walked over and sat down on the sofa across from me. The living room was very small with a coffee table between our knees on which sat a remote control and an open bag of preserved plums. Xiaoyan, what exactly are we? Her voice softened by a notch. Not the kind of softness that comes from tenderness, but the kind that comes from metal being heated until it deforms. You're my wife, I said. Can't you treat me like a wife? For example, tell me when something's on your mind. Don't make me dig it out of you like I'm interrogating a suspect. I looked at her. The light came from the side, casting shadows under her eyes. She hadn't slept well either. Some things it's not that I don't want to say them. Is that telling you would do you no good? Her expression changed. You think I can't handle it? I think you're working on a big case. There are things in this case you don't know about. Knowing them would only put you in danger. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm begging you. I lowered my voice. That woman staying one more day in the hospital can only help your case, not hurt it. Give me 24 hours. Something stirred in her eyes. Who exactly are you? She said. I did not answer. She waited for a long time. Then she stood up, picked up the bottle of mineral water, and walked into the bedroom. The door closed softly, but in the quiet living room, no sound could be shut out. I sat on the sofa for another 20 minutes. Then I took out the encrypted phone and sent a short message. Speed it up. 1 in the morning. The night shift in the hospital emergency department is always a peculiar state. The late night ER is like a well, calm on the surface, but containing anything beneath. After finishing with a patient suffering from alcohol poisoning, I filled out the shift log and walked to the triage desk with a cup of coffee. At the end of the corridor, the plain-clothed guard watching the ward had changed shifts. The one now at the door was older, dozing off on a folding chair, his phone screen glowing on his lap. The light at the nurse's station was still on. Shirao-chun was asleep at the desk, her eye mask tilted over one eye. Silence. I took a sip of coffee. Then I heard a sound that didn't belong in the hospital. The automatic doors of the emergency hall were pushed open by someone. Not triggered by the sensor. They were forced open from the outside. The motor reversed briefly, letting out a harsh, grating screech. 3 people walked in. All of them were wearing black short sleeves with tattoos on their arms. The one in the lead had a crew cut, his eyes scanning the emergency hall under the lights before settling on the triage desk. Looking for someone, the crew cut said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the confidence of someone accustomed to not needing to raise it in a noisy environment. The intern Xiaolu at the triage desk looked up, but before he could even open his mouth, the man with the crew cut was already in front of him, slapping his palm flat on the counter. A woman was brought in this afternoon with an abdominal injury. Which room is she in? Xiao's face turned pale. Sir, is there anything I can? I asked you which room. The man with the crew cut tapped his fingers. On the counter, the 2 men behind him spread out, one watching the corridor, the other retreating to the entrance of the hall. Their positioning was textbook. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment move. It was a trained security formation. Fang Sudong's men, turned out, weren't all just street thugs. I placed the coffee cup on the nurse's station counter. Shirao-chan let out a soft beside me, stirred awake by the sound of the cup being set down. She lifted her eye mask, glanced toward the hallway, and froze. Shoo! I patted her shoulder, signaling her not to move. Then I walked out from behind the nurse's station. That's my patient. I walked up to the triage desk, standing between Xiaolu and the crew cut-up man. The crew cut-up man's gaze shifted to me. He was half a head taller than me with shoulders a full size broader, but his center of gravity leaned to the right, more weight on his right foot, indicating it was his dominant leg. His right hand was slightly behind his back, likely concealing a short weapon. Are you a doctor? Attending physician in the emergency department. You can tell me what's going on. Step aside. We're taking the person away. What's your relationship with the patient? Family member. The patient didn't register any emergency contact upon admission. Do you have identification? The crew cut man's face showed no change in expression. He didn't want to get tangled up with me. Doctor. His voice dropped a notch. Be smart about this. His right hand came out from behind his back. A folding knife. The blade snapped open. 12 centimeters. Single-edged. With a bright gleam. The plain-clothed officer dozing at the end of the corridor was startled awake by the noise, springing to his feet with his hand reaching for his waist. But the man at the entrance of the hall had already blocked his path, also brandishing a knife of the same model. Don't move. The one blocking the door turned back to warn the plainclothes officer. The plainclothes officer's hand froze at his waist, his face turning ashen. He was alone facing 3 of them. There were 2 more patients and 3 nurses on duty in the emergency room. I glanced toward the operating room. On the gurney was still the instrument tray that hadn't been cleared away from the afternoon. stainless steel weighing about 600 g. The crew cut man took a step toward me. The tip of the knife pointed in the direction of my throat. One last time. Move aside. My body moved before my brain did. This is not my reaction as an emergency room doctor. This is my reaction as an iron blade field medic. The difference is an emergency room doctor would step back. I did not step back. He grabbed the stainless steel tray in front of him with his left hand and held it in front of his body. The crew cut man's knife thrust forward, the tip striking the tray with a metallic clang. The recoil force halted his arm for a fraction of a second. Enough. I locked my right hand around his wrist, pressing my thumb precisely against the radial styloid process. The superficial branch of the radial nerve at this location is extremely sensitive. I pressed down and twisted with a crack. His fingers uncontrollably spread open. The knife clattered to the ground, bouncing twice on the floor. Then I swept the edge of the tray across the back of his knee. He dropped to one knee. I seized the moment, grabbed the back of his head, and pressed it downward. His face slammed into the triage desk. The sound of his nasal bone cracking crisp and clear. He lay motionless on the desk. The whole process took less than 2 seconds. The man in plain clothes blocking the hallway was already charging toward me. He was heavier and not slow either, but the way he ran revealed his fighting style. He was used to solving problems with brute force. A straight line attack. I stepped to the left. His shoulder brushed past me as he rushed by. I struck him with my elbow on the 7th thoracic vertebrae, the center of his back, where the paraspinal muscles converge. It won't cause permanent damage, but it's enough to induce a diaphragmatic spasm. He let out a muffled groan, his whole body curling forward as he braced himself with his hands on the ground. Retching. The third person stood still, not moving. His hand reached inside his coat. Don't pull it out, I said. His movement paused. Once you pull it out. If it's a gun. The surveillance camera at position 71 in this corridor will capture it clearly. If you fire a shot, your face will be on the provincial department's wanted list by tomorrow. I pointed to the dome-shaped camera on the ceiling. If it's not a gun, I suggest you take a look at the 2 brothers beside you before making a decision. He glanced at the crew cut guy lying on the triage desk with a bloody nose, then at the second guy kneeling on the ground. Retching. He withdrew his hand from his coat. Empty. Turn around. Put your hands behind your head. He did as he was told. The plain-clothes officer finally snapped out of it and rushed over to pin the third person against the wall. Shirao Chun poked half his head out from behind the nurse's station, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Shalu crouched under the triage desk. Trembling, I bent down and picked up the folding knife, closed it, and placed it on the counter. Then I picked up the phone and dialed the emergency number. City Central Hospital Emergency Department. 3 armed individuals have broken in and are now under control. Please dispatch police. I hung up. I glanced at my right hand. Steady. Not a single shake. Shirao Chan walked out from behind the nurse's station, her voice trembling. Dara. What exactly did you do before? I pushed her back behind the nurse's station. Emergency room doctor. I encounter a lot of urgent cases. That person stabbed you with a knife and you blocked it with a tray. Stainless steel. Good quality. She clearly didn't believe it, but she had no energy left to press further. Slumped in the chair, her eyes red-rimmed. 15 minutes later, 3 police cars arrived. 20 minutes later, Shin Rue arrived. She was wearing a casual hoodie she hadn't had time to change with a jacket over it. Her hair tied back in a ponytail. The holster was strapped on hastily, the belt not yet fully tightened. When she rushed into the emergency hall, the crew cut man and the other 2 were already subdued by the responding police officers. She scanned the scene, the blood stains on the floor, the knocked-over triage desk, scattered instrument trays, and a plain-clothes officer squatting in the corner taking notes. Then she saw me. I was crouching on the ground, prying open Banson's eyelids to check his pupil response. Pupils equal and round. Glasgow Coma Scale score of 14. Nasal bone fracture. No signs of intracranial hemorrhage. I didn't look up. You can take him away. Shinui walked up to me. She didn't say anything. She crouched down. meeting my eyes at the same level up close. There were several layers shifting in her eyes. The calm of a criminal investigator surveying a crime scene. The anxiety of a wife checking on her husband's safety. But the outermost layer was something I had never seen on her face before. Confusion. "Are you injured?" she asked. No, she glanced down at my right hand. There was no wound on my fingers, but a red mark left by a razor blade grazing across the knuckles. Very shallow, not even breaking the skin. Her fingers brushed against the red mark. The touch was very light. 3 people. You took them down alone. Lucky they weren't very professional. She looked at me. I knew she didn't believe it, but she didn't press further. At least not on the spot. The next morning, Shin Rue did not show up at the hospital. Han Jiang arrived. He stood at the door of my office, his expression even more complicated than yesterday. There was a hint of a smile on his lips, as if he wanted to laugh, but felt awkward doing so. "I heard you took down 3 people by yourself last night. I just happened to run into them during the night shift." Happened to. He walked in, closed the door behind him, leaned against it with his arms crossed, and said, "I watched the surveillance footage. I didn't respond. The way you blocked the knife, your side angle was precise, and the speed at which you grabbed the tray was faster than his knife strike. And that wrist lock afterward. I've practiced SA for 8 years and I've never seen such precise joint control. The emergency room often deals with victims of violent injuries and occasionally we have to defend ourselves." Dara Han Jiang interrupted. "Don't treat me like a fool." There was a toucan silence. "You're not an ordinary doctor," he said. "I'm a very ordinary doctor." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he let out a scoff, shook his head, and walked away before leaving. He turned back and said, "Whoever you are, don't drag out Shin Ru's case." The door closed. I sat in the chair and thought for 5 minutes. Hanjin is no fool. He is already suspicious. But suspicion is one thing. For now, his attention is still on the case, not on me. The problem is this window of opportunity won't last long. Noon. I took advantage of a break during my shift to visit the ward. Nightingale looked a bit better than yesterday. She was eating the hospital boxed meal. Most of the rice was gone, but she had barely touched the vegetables. "Not to your taste. I've had much worse over the past 2 years." She put down her chopsticks. "Good news is there's no sign of infection in my wound. Your stitching skills are still as steady as ever." "I know my skills are good. Let me tell you something." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Last night, Fong Sudong sent 3 people to find you. I stopped them." Her hand froze mid-motion as she set down the boxed meal. "Are you okay? They're the ones who are more in trouble. The thing is, Fong Sudong knows you're in this hospital. Next time, there won't be just 3 people coming. And they won't be carrying just folding knives." Her jaw tightened. I glanced at the plain-clothed officer in the hallway and lowered my voice to a whisper. "You said earlier that Fong Sudong has someone in the provincial department. Do you have any leads to narrow it down?" "I only know that person's code name. Fong Sudong calls him the Compass internally. Every time there's a shift in police operations, Fong Sudong gets an early warning. The Compass has access to core case information and his rank is definitely not low." "How many people in the provincial department have access to core information on cross-border drug trafficking cases?" "I've analyzed it. No more than 5. 5. Shin Rue's direct superior. Lu Jana is one of them. Can you identify who these 5 people are? I can provide a timeline of Fong Sudong's activities. Every time the Compass passes along intelligence, the organization conducts a shelter and all transactions are suspended. If you can obtain the behavioral trajectories of these high-ranking officials in the provincial department during the same period for comparison, then you can pinpoint the Compass." She looked at me. "Ditcher, you've been out of the military for 3 years, but your analytical skills haven't dulled. Analysis isn't worth much." I stood up. "The hard part is getting the behavioral trajectories of the provincial department's key figures. How do you plan to get them?" I thought for a moment. "My wife happens to work in the provincial department." Nightingale glanced at me and finally smiled. That smile was distorted by the wound on her abdomen, causing her to hiss in pain. But the amusement didn't fade. "Are you going to tell her?" "Not everything, just part of it." "Are you sure?" "Not sure. I said. But for now, it's the best option. I returned to the office and took out the encrypted phone again. A message from Xiao Guodong arrived. They're already on the way. Arriving tonight. Tonight. Still half a day to go. I turned off my phone, picked up the white coat, and put it back on. Zhao Yin. The emergency department doctor was back again at 4 p.m. I sent a WeChat message to Xin Ru. Are you home tonight after work? I'll cook. She replied with 3 words. Something up? Yes. A minute later, she replied with 1 word. Okay. 8. In the evening in the kitchen, I stir-fried 2 dishes. Tomato scrambled eggs and sweet and sour spare ribs. I learned these 2 dishes in the kitchen of the Iron Blade base. Back then, the camp's cook had been discharged, and Xiao Guang told us to handle our own meals. A group of special ops team members took turns at the stove with varying skill levels. But only my cooking never made anyone sick. By the time Xin Rue got home, the dishes were already set out. She changed into slippers and sat down across the dining table, not immediately picking up her chopsticks. You said there was something to discuss. I served her a bowl of rice. Let's eat first, then talk. She glanced at me and didn't insist. We ate in silence for 10 minutes. This was the first time since our marriage that we had properly sat down together for a meal before. Either she was working overtime or I was on duty. The most recent shared meal was when we both grabbed bottles of water in front of the fridge and locked eyes. The ribs are good, she said. Army cooking. I replied without thinking. Her chopsticks stopped. Military unit. I had already let it slip. But it didn't matter anymore. I had planned to tell her part of it tonight anyway. I set down my chopsticks. Shun Ruer. In your case, there's something you don't know. Her eyes locked onto me. She rested her chopsticks on the rim of the bowl, not setting them down. That woman, the one you were going to take from the hospital, isn't one of Fang Sudong's people. Silence. 3 seconds. Go on. She was my comrade in arms. Xin Rue's pupils contracted. I can't tell you her exact identity, but she has the complete chain of evidence against Fang Sudong. Upstream and downstream channels, financial flows, transportation routes. All of it is in her head. Your former comrade in arms. Xin Rue repeated those 4 words at a very slow pace. What else don't I know about you? A lot, but none of it is relevant to today's matter. What you need to know today are 2 things. Speak. First, Fang Sudong knows she's in the hospital. The 3 who came last night were just the advance team. The next wave will be more intense. Every second she stays in the hospital is dangerous. Not just for her, but for your people, my colleagues, the nurses. The entire emergency department is within his strike range. Xin Rue's fingers clenched together, his knuckles turning slightly white. Second, Fang Sudong has someone inside the provincial department. Her breath caught for a moment. What did you say? In your case, Fang Sudong always knows the police's next move in advance. He has an inside source code named Compass, and it's someone with considerable rank, at least able to access the core information of your task force. The light on the dining table was a warm yellow. The 2 dishes still gave off a faint warmth. Outside, the sound of a car passing by could be heard. They looked like an ordinary couple having dinner. But in those 3 seconds, Shun Rue's face underwent a transformation I had never seen before. Her expression was neither anger nor shock, but a structural tremor shaken from its very foundation. Criminal police trust system. She trusts her team, her superiors, her system. These 3 things are the foundation that supports her every day as she straps on her gun and handcuffs and walks out the door. And I just told her that a bomb was buried in that foundation. How do you know? She asked. Her voice lowered. My comrade told me she has the timeline of Fang Sudong's internal shelter operation. Every time the Compass passed intelligence, Fang Sudong would suspend all transactions. All you need to do is cross-reference this timeline with the behavioral patterns of the few people in the provincial department who have access to the case information, and you'll be able to identify the Compass. I looked at her. But you can't check through official channels because the person you're investigating might very well be your superior. Xin Rue's hands clenched into fists. Then she did something I didn't expect. She took out her phone, logged into an encrypted email system and operated it for about a minute. Then she turned the phone around to show me. On the screen was a table. The work schedules of 5 leaders at or above the deputy director level in the Provincial Criminal Investigation Corp. It was extremely detailed down to the morning and afternoon itineraries of each day. "Is this enough?" she asked. "Where did you get this?" "The deputy director's secretary is my classmate from the police academy. She doesn't know what I'm up to, just that I wanted to see the schedule." I looked at her. "Did you prepare this? Did you think I did nothing all day today?" She put away her phone last night. "You single-handedly took down 3 knife-wielding thugs. Your file before the age of 22 is completely sealed. You said that woman is your comrade in arms. Do you expect me to wait until you've explained everything before I take action?" She stood up and gathered the dishes into the sink. The faucet was turned on and the sound of water echoed in the kitchen. "I'm a criminal investigator. I can't look into your past, but I can look into what you care about. You're protecting that woman, which means she's important. Why she's important, I'll figure that out myself." She turned off the faucet. "As for who you really are," she turned around and looked at me. "Once this case is closed, you will explain everything to me word by word." I watched her standing under the kitchen light. Her brow bone high, her eyes bright, her hands still dripping water, and suddenly felt that the person sitting across from me at that matchmaking table, I might not have truly seen. "Deal," I said. This was the second time since our marriage that we had reached a consensus with the word deal. The first time was during 3 hours in the emergency room. This time the stakes were much higher. 11 p.m. that night. The schedule from Shun Rue's email and the shelter timeline provided by Nightingale were spread out on my desk. Nightingale had recorded the exact dates of 9 shelter events over the past 2 years. Within 24 hours before each shelter, the Compass had inevitably exchanged information with Fong Sudong. Around those 9 dates, the travel schedules of the 5 senior officials in the provincial department showed clear patterns of variation. Among them, 4 had irregularities in their schedules. Some were on business trips, some on leave, some in meetings, none of which fully aligned with all. 9 occasions only one person had a common thread in his schedule on the day before each of the 9 storm shelters. He was all out on official business and the destination field is blank. Lu Janaya, Deputy Director of the Provincial Criminal Investigation Department. Shin Ruer remained silent as he looked at the comparison results. Her thumb repeatedly rubbed the edge of the phone case, the silicone already worn to a shine. "This can't be used as evidence," she finally said. "Right? Behavioral patterns can only narrow down the scope. Not convict. You need concrete evidence, communication records, or financial transactions." Lu Jenya won't use registered communication channels, but 3 of Fong Sudong's people came last night. Once they're caught, their information will flow into the provincial system. If the Compass is Lu Jia, he will definitely react, either by interfering with the interrogation or by notifying Fong Sudong to relocate in advance. "You want to use them as bait. Smart." She looked up at me. "Don't flatter me." Early morning. Shan Ruer returned to the provincial department to work overtime. I waited in the office for news from Xiao Guodong at 24 a.m. The encrypted phone vibrated. "The team has arrived in your city. The team leader's codename is Rivet. Meeting point, basement level B3 of the downtown hospital parking lot. He will find you." I turned off the phone. "Stand up and take the elevator down to the 3rd basement level. The parking spots on B3 are almost entirely empty. Half of the fluorescent lights are broken, and the other half emit a low-frequency hum. A black commercial van is parked next to the fire lane with its lights off." I walked to the back of the van and knocked 3 times. The car door was pulled open from the inside. 5 people sat inside, all in plain clothes, but their posture, the direction of their gaze, and where they placed their hands were completely different from ordinary people. The leader was in his early 30s with an old scar running from his brow bone to his cheekbone, and one eye was a prosthetic stitcher. He stood up, lowering his body inside the carriage. "Rivets." He reached out his hand. I took it. His palm was covered in calluses with gun calluses on the web of his thumb. Commander Xiao briefed me on the situation. "Where is that person?" 3rd floor of the inpatient building, the 2nd single room on the east side. There are two plainclothes police officers at the door. Just pull the plainclothes officers away. They're my wife's people. Not easy to pull them directly. Rivets blinked his one good eye. Your wife is right. A criminal police officer. He paused. Commander Shao also mentioned one more thing. He told me to let you know that while transferring Nightingale, he will send a coordination letter to the provincial department through the military inspection system. The content of this letter involves the compass. It will be enough to trigger an internal review process at the provincial department. When will he send it? 8 tomorrow morning. By then, the entire provincial department will be in chaos. Your wife's plain-clothes officers won't be able to keep an eye on the hospital room. I thought for a moment. Then we'll synchronize the operation at 8 tomorrow morning. There's one more thing. Rivet said. Commander Shao asked me to bring you something. He pulled a flat metal case from under the car seat. He pressed the lock open. Inside was a standard issue pistol, a communication headset, and a worn iron identity tag. A polished metal plate with my code and serial number embossed on it. Temporary reinstatement signed by Commander Shao. He said that if something goes wrong, you're not acting as a civilian hero. You're carrying out a mission. I stared at the identity tag. 3 years no rust. But there was a faint scratch on it left by a piece of shrapnel that grazed it in the jungle that year. I picked up the dog tag and clenched it in my palm. The metal pressed against my palm. Very cold. Then it warmed up. Got it, I said. Back in the emergency department. It was 4:20 in the morning. I stared at the clock in my office for 3 hours. 7:58. My phone rang. It was Xin Ru Zhaoyan. Something happened at the provincial department. Her voice was rapid. A letter of assistance from the military procuratorate arrived at Deputy Director Lu's office. It involves a leak investigation. Deputy Director Lu. He applied for emergency leave. It was rejected by the director. Where is he now? In his office. The door is closed and he's not seeing anyone. The disciplinary inspection has already stepped in. What about your Planello officers? They've been reassigned to assist the disciplinary inspection. Only one is left at the hospital. Wait, how did you know the Planello officers would be reassigned? I didn't answer at the same time. Rivet had already led his men to the 3rd floor of the inpatient building. 8003. I walked to the door of the ward. The only remaining plain-clothes officer was on the phone. His back turned to me. The Rivet is already inside. Nightingale sat on the edge of the bed, her coat already on when she saw Rivet. The tension that had gripped her shoulders for 15 days finally gave way. Code name Nightingale. Operative of Operation Lighthouse. Your hand over contact Rivet has arrived. Rivet said in a standard military tone. Please follow me out. She stood up as she passed by me. She paused for a moment. Stitcher. The wounds you stitch won't come apart. They never have before. And they won't this time either. Then she left. Rivet came over and shook my hand. Commander Shao said he'll handle the follow-up. You go back to work. He left too. The hallway fell silent again. When the plane closed, officer finished his phone call and turned around. His face went pale as he saw the hospital bed was empty. He turned to look at me. Dar, where is that person? I don't know. I just got here. He rushed into the ward. I turned around and went back to the emergency department. As I passed the nurse's station, Xiao Chan handed me a cup of hot coffee. Dear Xiao, you look terrible. Didn't get any sleep last night. Did you have another fight with your sister-in-law? No, we're fine. Xiao Chan pursed his lips, his expression clearly saying, I don't believe you. I took a sip of my coffee. It was hot. 10 in the morning. 3 military jeeps stopped at the main entrance of the city center hospital. Their olive green paint stood out sharply among a row of white private cars and blue and white ambulances. The news spread throughout the entire hospital in about 3 minutes. Military vehicles have arrived. Is some high-ranking officer hospitalized? I heard something happened in the emergency department. I was bandaging a patient with a pinched finger. The automatic doors of the emergency hall opened. This time triggered by the normal sensor. They first to enter were 2 officers in crisp uniforms, each standing on one side. Then came Xiao Guodong. He looked older than 3 years ago, more gray hair at his temples, deeper wrinkles on his face, but his posture remained as straight as ever, as if the air itself made way when he walked. 2 stars on each shoulder. Major General behind him followed a civilian officer and a staff officer. Everyone in the emergency hall stopped what they were doing. The patients stopped, the nurses stopped, and the family members queuing at the payment window also stopped. All eyes followed the man in military uniform. Xiao Guodong walked past the triage desk through the waiting area and headed straight toward the treatment zone of the emergency department. Hanjin happened to be coming from the other end of the corridor, intending to ask me about the disappearance of the Nightingale when he saw Xiao Guang's military uniform and rank. His pace noticeably slowed for a beat when Xiao Guang passed by. Hanjiang. He didn't even spare him a glance. He walked straight up to me. I was still holding the bandage in my hand, and the patient in front of me was staring at the general behind me with his mouth half open. Xiao Guodong stopped. He looked at me. I looked at him. 3 years no see. Then he stood at attention, knees together, heels clicking, right hand raised. A standard military salute. Xiao Guodong, former commander of the Iron Blade Special Operations Unit, reporting to the Stitcher. The entire emergency hall fell silent. Not an ordinary silence. It was the kind where the air itself seemed to freeze. Shirao Chen's mouth formed an A shape, and the disinfectant swab in his hand dropped to the floor. Hansen's expression looked as if someone had struck the back of his head with a wooden club. His brows furrowed, lips slightly parted, and he even forgot to regulate his breathing. A wound stitcher. He said that 20 hours ago. Xiao Guodong lowered his hand. You've lost weight, he said. I handed the bandage to the stunned intern beside me. You've aged. Xiao Guang smiled. Let's go talk outside. As we walked out of the emergency hall, I heard Han Zhang's voice behind me. He was on the phone, his voice trembling slightly. Xiaoan, get to the hospital now. You'll know when you get here. The hospital's administrative conference room had been temporarily requisitioned. Xiao Guodong's men stood guard at the entrance, keeping unauthorized personnel out. The Nightingale has safely withdrawn. Xiao Guodong sat across the conference table. A document spread out in front of him. Her intelligence is being transferred to the military prosecution system. Fang Sudong's case will be taken over by a joint military-civilian task force. What about Lu Jinia? The provincial department's disciplinary inspection has him under control. At 9 this morning, he tried to contact Fang Sudong using his personal phone, and the technical department intercepted it. Call logs, transfer records, and the investment agreement between Fang Sudong's foundation and his wife's company, all locked down. I leaned back in my chair. Clean. Clean because your comrade spent 2 years embedded in the opposing camp, Xiao Guang said, his gaze landing on my face. You've worked hard, too. I didn't do anything. I just stitched up a wound. You blocked 3 knives. That was an emergency department security issue. Xiao Guodong looked at me. A moment of silence. Zhao Yan, I have something official to tell you. Your temporary identity reinstatement can be extended. Tairen now needs a military doctor like you. Someone with battlefield experience, medical skills, and strong mental fortitude if you're willing to come back. No, he stopped. Once I finish this task, I'll return the ID badge and go back to being an emergency department doctor. Are you sure? I thought for 2 seconds. Sure. Back then, I left because I couldn't hold on to my own life on the battlefield. In the ER over 3 years, I've held on to many. You're atoning. I'm learning to stop treating wounds I can't stitch up as my own debt. Xiao Guodong was silent for a long time. Then he nodded. All right. The door was pushed open. Xin Rui stood at the entrance. Her gaze first fell on Xiao Guodong's rank. 2 stars. Major General then landed on me. Xiao Guodong stood up. You're Xiao Shan. He extended his hand. Xiao Guodong, your husband's former commanding officer. Xin Rui reached out and shook it. Her hand exerted a slight force, but her expression was well controlled. General Xiao. Just call me Old Xiao. Xiao Guodong smiled. I wasn't in the country when you got married, so I couldn't make it. Let me make up for it with a wedding gift. He pulled a red envelope from his pocket. Xin Rui didn't take it. She looked at me. So, you're part of the Iron Blade Special Task Force. I used to be code name Stitcher. I'm discharged now. Just X yen. Your file is sealed because every mission he carried out involved the highest level of national security secrets. Xiao Guodong answered for me. The details of several missions haven't been declassified to this day, so his file will remain sealed. Shin Russ' jaw tightened. 6 years, she said, her voice low. The hands that stitched my wound have hit people and held guns. They've also held scalpels. I corrected her. I was a medic, not an assault trooper. But yesterday, you single-handedly took down 3 armed thugs. Occupational instinct. She looked into my eyes. Those eyes were piercing through me. Not the scrutiny of a criminal investigator, but the gaze of a woman trying to get to know her husband. Anu, why didn't you tell me? I got used to it. I said the Iron Blade's rule. Identity information is not disclosed to anyone, including family. You're discharged now, but the rule is etched into my bones. She didn't say anything more. Xiao Guang with good timing coughed at this point. All right, you two sort out your own matters. I'm leaving. Zhou Yan, keep your ID tag for a week. Return it after the procedures are done. Xiaoan, regarding the case, the military-civilian joint team will follow up with the provincial department. You handle your end as usual. No delays. He paused at the door. Xiaozhen. Your husband was the best medic I've ever seen on the battlefield at home. Though, he glanced at me. It's hard to say. Please bear with me. Then he left. The two of us were left alone in the meeting room. The sound of a military vehicle starting its engine outside the window filtered in, rumbling low a few times before fading into the distance. Shenrue walked up to me very close. So close that I could smell the lemon scent of the shampoo in her hair. Zhou Yan. You owe me. We'll settle it slowly when we get home. Then she turned and walked away. The sound of leather shoes stepping on the corridor. Step by step, in a steady rhythm. I stood in the empty meeting room, watching her figure disappear around the corner of the corridor. The red envelope left by Xiao Guodong was still lying on the conference table. I picked it up and weighed it in my hand. Quite thick. Probably enough for me to trade for a bigger house. Lu Janaya's case sent shock waves through the entire provincial department. A deputy director suspected of acting as a protective umbrella for a cross-border drug trafficking syndicate. An offense so egregious that no parallel can be found in the history of the province's public security system. The evidence chain handed over by the military procuratorial system was alarmingly complete. The materials gathered by Nightingale during 2 years of undercover work, coupled with the intercepted communication records of Lu Janaya and the investment agreement between Fang Sudong's foundation and his wife's company. The entire set of evidence formed a closed loop from motive to action to the flow of funds in the first hour after being taken into custody. Lu Janaya did not utter a single word. In the second hour, he began to deny everything. I don't know Fang Sudong. Those calls were work-related. My wife's company has nothing to do with me. By the fourth hour, when he saw the detailed file from Fang Sudong's organization regarding the compass, including the times, the content, and even the code words he used to pass intelligence, his lips began to tremble. Shan Ruer did not participate in the interrogation. As a subordinate of Lu Janaya, she was required to recuse herself according to regulations. But Han Zhang participated. Afterward, Han Zhan said that when Lu Janaya signed the final document, his hand trembled so much he could barely hold the pen steady. The last 3 characters of his signature were crooked, like a primary school student's homework. Fang Sudong was apprehended that afternoon by the Joint Military-Civilian Task Force in a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The arrest operation was clean and swift. The last 6 of Fang Sudong's personal bodyguards didn't even have time to reach for their guns before being subdued. When the news reached the provincial department, the corridors of the entire building were crowded with people discussing it. Han Zhang found me that very night, not at the hospital, but at a beef noodle shop across from the hospital. I was eating noodles. He pulled out the chair opposite and sat down. He ordered a bottle of beer, opened it himself, and downed more than half of it. Then he set it down. That day, I called you a stitcher of wounds. His voice was muffled. Yeah, you said it. I'm sorry. No need to apologize. I really did stitch wounds. He looked at me. the corner of his mouth twitching as if he wanted to smile but didn't. You stitched over 400 lives on the battlefield. Xiao Guang told you that he told everyone present. Han Jiang took another gulp of beer. I practiced sand for 8 years and thought I was pretty good. That crew cut you took down in 2 seconds weighed 1-2 times as much as me. He had poor balance. You blocked a knife with a tray. It was stainless steel. You precisely struck the opponent's 7th thoracic vertebrae with your elbow, a location I learned in the R anatomy class. Hanjin spun the beer bottle on the table. Dara, if you hadn't explained, I feel better, but now that you have, I feel even more like an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're a good detective. Xin Rue is lucky to have you as a partner. He froze for a moment. Then he raised the beer bottle. I'll finish mine. You do as you please. I picked up my noodle bowl and clinked it against the mouth of his bottle. I'll have the soup. Hanjin tilted his head back and down the remaining half of the bottle, wiped his mouth, and stood up. Dara H. No. Brother Ho, call me what you were calling me before. Brother Ho, treat Xin Rue well. She's worth it. I know. He walked away. The noodle shop owner glanced at the empty bottle he left behind in the untouched chopsticks that had been frozen in place, then came over to clean up. Is that gentleman your friend? He barely ate anything. It's work-related. He's not in a good mood. Then you should order a bowl of noodles for him, too. I glanced in the direction Han Jiang had left. Next time. Everything wrapped up in a week. The Joint Military-Civilian Task Force finalized the nature of Fang Sudong's case. The amount involved was 830 million yuan spanning 6 provinces with 37 suspects arrested. Liu Jana was expelled from the party and removed from his post, then transferred to the procuratorial authorities. Nightingale's contributions will not appear in any public reports. Military intelligence personnel are not featured in the news. I returned my identity badge to the liaison officer sent by Xiao Guang on the 7th day. A metal piece clutched for 7 days, the warmth of my palm seeping into its scratches. When I let go, there was no particular feeling, just a little lighter. Life returned to normal. The emergency department went back to seeing patients and taking shifts as usual. Shirao Chan no longer dared to gossip about Xin Rue and me behind the nurse's station. Ever since she found out I used to be in the special forces, the way she looked at me changed from Dara to Instructor Zhao, and her hands trembled when handing me coffee. It took me 3 days to correct this habit of hers. Shirao-chan, yes, sir. You don't need to stand at attention or shout. Yes, sir. Just hand me that saline solution. She handed it over stiffly. I sighed. Friday night. It was rare that neither of us had to work. Xin Rue was reviewing case files on the sofa. I was making braised fish in the kitchen since last week. We've reached an informal agreement. Whoever gets home first cooks. The current score is 4-1 in my favor. That one time she made egg-fried rice. I won't comment on the taste, but the pot still hasn't been fully scrubbed clean. Zhao Yan, those missions of yours, which ones can you talk about? I thought for a moment. Once in the northwest, our vehicle overturned. Xiao Guodong broke 3 ribs, and I used a first aid kit and 2 branches to stabilize his chest in the desert. And then he said, Zhou Yan, go easy. I said, if you're complaining about the pain, it means you're still alive. Xin Rue didn't laugh. She walked to the kitchen doorway and leaned against the door frame about your nightmares. My hand flipping the fish paused for a moment. She never mentioned it, but after living together for over 2 weeks, she couldn't have been unaware. Sometimes you sit up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. She said, I always thought it was work stress. I was silent for a few seconds. There was a 19-year-old soldier. His femoral artery was severed by shrapnel. I applied pressure for 40 minutes. The helicopter never came. She didn't respond. The fish in. The pan sizzled. Oil splattered. And I shielded myself with the lid. Then I was discharged from the military. I said it flatly, but she walked over to me, stood by the stove, and turned sideways to look at me. Her hand brushed against the hand holding the spatula. Her fingertips rested on the back of my hand. Not clenched nor released, just left there. You said you came to the emergency room to atone for your sins. Her voice was equally flat. But you've never owed anyone anything. I said nothing. She withdrew her hand. The fish is burnt. I looked down and saw that one side of the fish was indeed burnt. The corner of her mouth curved slightly. It wasn't the restrained expression of a detective, but a very light, very small one. Your cooking skills really aren't as good as your suturing. Are you questioning the quality of military training? I'm stating a fact. I flipped the burnt side down. I can't taste it. Yes, you can. Then don't eat it. She opened the fridge from behind and grabbed a bottle of water as she passed by. Her free hand gently patted my back very lightly, like patting a comrade on the shoulder and also like patting a family member on the back. After dinner was finished, I washed the dishes. She wiped the table. The division of labor came naturally with no one assigning it. After wiping the table, she took something out of her coat pocket and placed it on the coffee table. Pair of handcuffs. What are you doing? I have my usual methods for suspects who withhold information. Shinru, you don't have to be so serious about this. Cuff him. I looked at the handcuffs. Then I looked at her. Her expression was serious. Not the kind of serious that comes from joking, nor the kind that comes from anger. It was something more complex. I extended my right hand. She locked one end of the handcuffs around my wrist. The metal was cold against the skin. Then she fastened the other end around her own wrist. Our hands were now linked together by the handcuffs. From now on, she said, wherever you go, I go. If you're on duty, I'll follow. If you're on a business trip, I'll follow until you've said everything you need to say. Then what about your job? I asked the captain for 3 days off. Said I had family matters to handle. Family matters. Interrogating my husband. If that's not a family matter, what is? I looked at our 2 hands bound together by the handcuffs. I shook it. The sound of metal clashing was crisp in the quiet living room. Shin Rum. Back then I told my brothers this was a power couple. She lifted her eyes to look at me with my handcuffed hand. I guided hers along with mine to pick up the lukewarm glass of water on the coffee table. It really does seem that way now. The corner of her mouth twitched. She didn't smile, but that movement was far more beautiful than a smile. The street lights outside the window flickered on. An ordinary Friday night. The phone in the emergency department didn't ring. Neither did the one at the provincial bureau. Only the occasional clink of handcuffs. A soft metallic sound echoed through this 60 square meter rental apartment.